So, you know, they're having that Cop City in Atlanta. Cop City is where they're going to cut down a forest and build a $80 million cop training place. And people don't want it. And so they're protesting it, right? Which is what Americans do when they don't like something. And
wait, are all like the defund the police people they're protesting it, or just a few people? Like,
I don't know who they're protesting Cop City.
Yeah.
So so you know, they have a bail fund, right? So if you get arrested, you don't have to put up bail yourself. There's a fund that people pay into, so people who are sympathetic to your cause. And early on Wednesday morning, police officers from the Atlanta Police Department and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation raided the Teardown House. That's a hub for a constellation of organizing activity in East Atlanta. At least a dozen officers in riot gear, wielding assault rifles, arrested 3 organizers from the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. That's a nonprofit that supports people who are arrested for protest or activism. The Solidarity Fund pays bail, provides jail support, and refers people who have been arrested to available lawyers. In other words, the Solidarity Fund connects people who are still presumed innocent to things that they are legally entitled to: the ability to have others pay their bail and a lawyer to represent them in court. As a collective of people who post bail for strangers, the Atlanta Solidarity Fund is one of nearly 100 organized bail funds around the country. These community bail funds share a sense that the state should not be subjecting people to the violence of jail simply because they cannot pay their bail. More essentially, bail funds understand that one powerful way to push back against the injustice of pre-trial detention is to join together in the act of paying bail for strangers. In the case of the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, much of their focus in the past year has been on providing this collective support to activists in their local movement to stop Cop City, shorthand for the Atlanta Police Foundation's plan to raise 85 acres of forest and, in its place, build a $90 million police training complex that includes a small model city in which to practice police tactics.
Well, at least they're turning it into something beautiful.
Yeah. You think they're going to be practicing de-escalation in those model cities? I don't think so.
They do need more practice in general. We've seen that.
We've seen that. The Cop City project would, in turn, be funded by at least $30 million in Atlanta's public funds and possibly as much as $51 million in public money. For more than 2 years, the Stop Cop City movement has pushed back against this proposal, though, through protest actions and tactics ranging from occupation of the forest to mass testimony at city council hearings on the proposal. In return, local and state police have continuously surveilled and criminalized these activities, beginning with the arrests of protesters in September 2021. The movement lost its first member to state violence. In January 2023, Georgia State Patrol killed a 26-year-old non-binary movement activist who was known as Tortuguita and who was shot at least 57 times.
57 times? God, what do you have, like a bazooka or something?
No, he was just sitting cross-legged in the forest without a gun.
Oh.
According to the police, that guy fired first and hit a state trooper, but the available evidence, including the autopsy report, body camera footage, and a lack of gunpowder residue on his body, point to the state trooper being hit by a fellow officer and then Tortuga's hands being up in the air when they gunned him down in cold blood.
Well, this is why they need training, because they don't know how to handle a guy sitting.
Autopsy reveals anti-cop activists' hands were raised when they shot and killed him.
Wow.
So now they're terrorizing the people who get bail for these people who are arrested for just doing their First Amendment protected protesting. 3 Solidarity Fund organizers were arrested this week: Marlon Kautz, Adele McLean, and Savannah Patterson. They have been initially charged with felony crimes of charity fraud and money laundering.
Really?
Yeah.
But BLM roams free still. Okay.
That's the...
Wow.
Right?
But nobody brings them up that much anymore.
Nope, because they're completely corrupted. Georgia officials are not hiding the underlying theory of these prosecutions. That to be part of a group supporting protesters is in itself a crime. So they are criminalizing protest.
Wait.
And supporting protests is now a crime in Atlanta.
That's an underlying. Where is the next thing? Say what their underlying theory is. Is that what?
State prosecutors said as much during the bail hearing of dozens of activists who were charged earlier this year with state domestic terrorism charges. Their terrorism being the alleged destruction of property or trespassing while engaged in a protest.
They terrified those cops.
Terrified. They used as evidence against the activists at their bail hearings the fact that some of those arrested had written on their arms the phone number of the Atlanta Solidarity Fund in case bail was set against them. The activists were correct in their fear that the police might arrest protesters and attempt to hold them in cages because they couldn't afford bail. And for that prescience, they were labeled terrorists. So that's all they do now. If the cops and if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they say you're a terrorist. And now you have no rights because Barack Obama signed the Section 1021 of the NDAA in 2011, which said if you're a frickin' terrorist, you don't get any rights and the government can lock you up with indefinite detention without a trial. That means they repealed habeas corpus, meaning you have no right to a trial in America if a cop arrests you. That is gone now if they say you're a terrorist. And they're saying these people who are just raising bail money are terrorists. Do you see how Barack Obama is a complete tool of the FBI, the CIA, military-industrial complex, the Wall Street, and the establishment? He was never ever what people thought our first black president was going to be. He was worse than anything you could imagine. And now they're using what Barack Obama did, call people terrorists. Now they can lock them up forever without a trial. The state's intention to criminalize dissent could not have been clearer to both the prosecutors and those they were prosecuting. This is a long-standing tactic of the repression of dissent, to criminalize the collective care of activists, including through the payment of money bail. So you just criminalize whatever the activists are doing, you make it a criminal.
You know, I just realized, like, you know, they'll put out some fake conspiracy for the one, like the dumbest to believe, and then paint all the legitimate stuff with that one conspiracy.
Yeah.
These other fake movement, because autopsy shows his hands were up, right?
Yeah.
Remember the hands up, don't shoot, that an autopsy showed, no, his hands were not up. So this is a perfect wedge thing if you're some kind of conservative that doesn't, you know, that dumb of a conservative, like, oh, what, they hate cops and BLM, can associate all those bullshit things with a thing that actually happened, and then it goes away. Black Uhuru movement, but the suspicious things are like, what is their problem? They have bail for people? and if you right wing and you're like, F them, remember what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse when people were trying to pay his bail and they shut down it? I hope people figure out that, like, that dichotomy is fake. Like, it starts to get through to them when, like, the same things happen to everybody, you know?
Yes.
Even the people you hate, and then you find out, like, oh, they're not at all what I was told. And it actually sucks to learn, but people have to.
Oh, here it is. In the 1950s, for example, the federal government targeted a bail fund run by the Civil Rights Congress that supported people charged in politically motivated prosecutions, especially those accused of communism under the Second Red Scare. The Congress's president, writer Dashiell Hammett, served 5 months in a federal prison because he would not reveal the names of the funders of the bail fund. So if you donated to that bail fund, they wanted him to give up those people's names so they can go terrorize them and put him in jail, and he wouldn't give them their names, so they put him in jail. More recently, politicians across the political spectrum have surveilled and attacked community bail funds in the wake of the 2020 uprising against police violence. So they had one for BLM bail funds. They didn't raid those people. They didn't put those people in jail.
There's a bunch of things where people start bail funds for whatever, you know, during all these great last 4 years, where people would post bail and then the opposing whatever, their ops would be like, let's find out who gave them money and go get them. But this is the state coming down.
Coming down.
I mean, this is like, And a bunch of people were complaining, rightly so, like, what do you, like, the guy can't have bail because you don't like him ideologically? I'll bet you this won't get as much play from people as the other ones.
So this week's, by the way, this is very similar to what Justin Trudeau did.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
In Canada. So when the truckers who were 100% peaceful and vaccinated at a higher rate than the general population in Canada, they weren't protesting medicine. They were protesting authoritarianism, and they were right. So when they did that, the state, which works for the corporation, which works for Big Pharma, had to call them terrorists. They called them terrorists. And then they, even though they were the most peaceful protests in the history of protests, they then could take their money away. And how did they do it? They shut down their electronic bank accounts. That's it. You're all over. You can't go to work. You can't pay. You can't buy gas to get in your car to go anywhere. You can't pay your bills. You can't fly anywhere. You can't do anything.
Even smart, like people that really smart people were fooled by, like with sharp minds like Trevor Noah were very fooled by them.
This week's prosecutions of the Atlanta Solidarity Fund organizers have taken this form of state political repression to a new level. In what is a first in recent memory, prosecutors are openly charging people with felonies simply for being organizers within a bail collective that uses legally established procedures to post bail for movement allies. As state officials in Georgia are demonstrating, this does not always require the passage of a new criminal law, although states are doing that too. By criminalizing the support structures of social movements, government officials are acknowledging how threatening it is when people come together to live out understandings of public safety and collective freedom that clash with the government's stated priorities. Alec, this guy's a big civil rights lawyer. He says a bone-chilling development in Atlanta just now. Heavily militarized police just arrested bail support and legal defense workers who are providing charitable support to protesters arrested for opposing Cop City in Atlanta. Police are calling it financial crimes. So I retweeted this. I retweeted this with comment, and people underneath were telling me, "No, Jimmy, they're arresting them for fraud." And that's like, you fucking...
When was the last time? Let's talk about financial crimes and fraud. When was the last time you heard of somebody getting shot 57 times?
It's for a financial crime.
The big joke is that would never happen to you if you're committing fraud. That happens to you if you're like selling drugs or something.
As many have written before, the expansion of fascist state repression we are seeing and the silence of many progressives and liberals is on the verge of forever changing our society. Take a look at this. This logic by the Republican Attorney General will suggest that anyone donating to a bail fund or a legal support charity is guilty of a felony of terrorism crimes. How liberal institutions react to this fascist abuse of power will be vital. Here's the Attorney General in Georgia saying, as we have said before, we will not rest until we have held accountable every person who has funded, organized, or participated in this violence and intimidation. So they're calling organizing bail for people intimidation of the cops.
They're not even calling it stochastic terrorism
They're not even
anymore. They're not even using that.
And now the governor. Everyone should be scared by this, an alarming escalation of politically motivated state repression. So the governor and the attorney general in Georgia are screwing over the people for organizing First Amendment constitutional protected rights. Hey, everybody, only $10 to go see my new stand-up special, COVID Lies Are Funny, at jimmydore.com. And come see us do a live show. We're going to be in Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Bakersfield, California, Baltimore, San Francisco, Huntington Beach, Rosemont, and Chicago, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, and more. We're going to be in New York, Stamford, Connecticut, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, San Diego, everywhere. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all our tickets.